Hi, everyone. So I'm here to represent Public Services and Procurement Canada, and as well the Department of National Defence by proxy. We're in a partnership at the moment to help digitally transform the real property area, which is our construction sector within federal government, and really look at the services that we provide under our mandate at Public Services and Procurement Canada, which is to serve other client departments. So I would like everyone to keep in mind today that I am going through this at a very high level, but if you'd ever like to ask me questions or know more, I am always happy to talk. So one of the questions that I get asked very often is why digital transformation for government owners is so slow and so complicated. And the quick answer is, in 2008, when we first started looking at BIM, it wasn't a proven concept for owners, simply because if you look at this graphic, BIM is a very small part of project delivery, and we look at much, much more. So everything that you see under the blue block here, the portfolio, project delivery, these are our programs that we follow through and we answer to government in relation to. So we have the portfolio and how we maintain our portfolio of 33,000 buildings, and that's just the buildings I can talk about. Project delivery, we have climate change and climate action objectives, we have heritage objectives, and we have obviously operations and maintenance. And in the red below, you can see what we've started to look at and investigate, but you can imagine the sheer amount of work that this would be to implement for the portfolio program, which is, as I said, 33,000 buildings. And with a proprietary system, or even a system that hasn't necessarily been proven at the scale and workflow that we are looking at for information exchange and an information environment that we can use for management of that information, it was not something that we could throw our weight behind in 2008. And the other issue that we've come across within government is simply the fact that our policies do not support a national management of real property in a digital way. Our policies are dealt with separately. So you can see here we have the management of real property, and it looks at some of those government objectives like sustainable development, heritage, and that's all to the left. However, it has no mention of information management whatsoever. There's no requirement stipulated there. The information management for all government departments is stipulated instead in the IM and IT strategy. And in the IM and IT roadmap, there is no stipulation for spatial data. And there's no stipulation for spatial processes, which means that 3D isn't considered at all. And in fact, it's a struggle just to have 2D considered in that way. So what this means is real property is not considered as an area or a sector within our two policies merged. So what we're trying to address with our government policy renewal that's going on currently this year and following into the next couple is that we're looking at the gaps and opportunities to bring these two policies together in a way that will facilitate a new type of construction strategy for the Government of Canada. And really what that looks at is the standard on geospatial data, which existed before, but a standard on building data, an integrated between GIS and BIM data standard that would facilitate the way that we exchange information all through the life cycle, but horizontally across our entire portfolio. So, as I mentioned earlier, there are other factors to the why now. One of those being climate change and the signature of the Paris Agreement, and our objectives for a carbon neutral portfolio by 2030, greenhouse gas reductions. There's also the economic situation and the differentiation in our recapitalization budget, our innovation budget, and how different governments look at that budgeting. And finally, the people and the technology have matured in the way that we do BIM in Canada, which means there's more people available to hire, and there's more software available that can meet end user needs in this day and age for a large owner who's looking at multiple use cases. So what would it mean for us? Well, a heck of a lot more than life cycle BIM, and a lot more than 3D BIM. It's a complete change management for the way that we communicate and collaborate in that area. It's a complete change in the way that we handle Outlook. It's a complete change in the way that we handle requests for information. Lots of the different components of working at a government laptop or a government desk has to do with these enterprise solutions that we have that really have an opportunity to integrate with something like BIM, but we have not considered as of yet. Faster and lasting results and agility. And what I mean by that is better decision-making up front in the hands of the owners and the investors, rather than just the project management team. We've been able to prove through research and speaking with great people like the people in this room that considering it much farther ahead and looking at it from a decision-making perspective enables the project management to make even better decisions in the project delivery stage. If we introduce it in project management, yes, it's definitely impressive benefit, but upfront early on, decisions like investment analysis, decisions like options analysis and feasibility, these things are greatly enabled. We have obviously opportunities to increase the productivity of our real property employees. Capital cost reductions, we see proven results from the US and the UK. Return on investment, obviously, we do reinvest in our properties. And of course, better information. We have a lot of systems that are legacy systems that currently do not necessarily speak well together. And this is an opportunity to make sure that our systems in an information environment can seamlessly exchange and be able to talk. Think Internet 4.0, Internet of Things. Intelligent buildings, of course, as well. We're not just looking at smart buildings, we're looking at smart campuses. And in fact, we are involved with several initiatives that are looking at smart cities, especially in Ottawa, capital. We also have been investigating things like blockchain for transactions, and of course smart contracting. We're looking at 3D cloud collaboration, how we would secure that, and of course how we track liability, how we track accountability, how we track responsibility within the scope of real property. And that's not just tied to the model, but all the things that support the model, where you get the information from, who's actually entering it and responsible for entering it, etc. Of course, we're talking also about connectivity. At the moment, I had to request a new notebook, and funnily enough, I went from an i3 processor to an i5 processor, and I still can't run Revit, and I'm the national BIM lead. Workplace renewal is a big one. We're looking at things like activity-based workspaces, being able to have an unassigned workspace. How does that work when we have, plans, drawings, sections, details, schedules, and we need to be in meetings, and how does that work across the scope of a country? So we're looking at, the digital workplace in a real way, and again, this is an opportunity to plug BIM into a much larger enterprise initiative. We're also, again, as I mentioned, looking at the ways that BIM can support our measures against climate change, and what does that look like? Linking assets, cultural landscapes, and initiatives. We have, for example, Parks Canada and the Parliamentary Precinct actually facilitating digital tourism with point clouds and with virtual reality. How can we narrate some of the landscapes that are difficult to reach, your very own mountains, for example? How can we really penetrate the veil of what's accessible versus not? And accessibility itself is something that we speak about a lot within government. How can we make our cultural experiences more accessible for generations to come and the generations that exist now? And again, open government information, federal collaboration, and industry support. And I'll speak a bit about this more later. And just to give everyone some perspective about the importance of why D&D and PSPC have stepped forward to take a little bit of leadership and ownership in this. In the red, you can see everything that PSPC owns. In the blue, you can see everything that National Defense owns. Now, what isn't depicted here is everything in gray that PSPC delivers as a service. So, for example, I passed the Hayes building on the way here. I looked it up when I was at the hotel last night. We do have lots of data on the Hayes building, and it's just here on Riverfront Road. So all of this data that we house, it doesn't necessarily belong to us, but we are the custodians in an information management way, even though the actual custodian of the building is not my department at all. And so our mandate as PSPC is to provide services. However, our mandate is not to set the standards in construction, to set the standards in real property. We are a body of experts. We provide technical expertise, we provide oversight, quality assurance and control, but it's not necessarily our mandate to lead unless we are asked to, given our expertise. And this is exactly the role that National Defense asked us to play. And then in discussion with our Treasury Board Secretariat and the Privy Council Office, we did fill. So some of our departmental drivers as to why we have expertise in this field in both groups. So on the right, you can see some of the departmental drivers from the National Defense, and on the left, some of the departmental drivers from PSPC. We do have, as I said, workplace renewal, but really our client service design, the way that we provide services, we're trying to change. We're trying to modernize. There's also the way that we work. We're trying to green the way we work, looking at digital workplaces and remote access, etc. Another large one is the way that we look at a portfolio. The life cycle lens has really changed a lot from the perspective of owner-investor. The way that we cost, the way that we analyze investments, the way that we make decisions regarding real estate. These are things that we considered before but had not met a standardized methodology, for example. And of course, heritage conservation. We have a lot of heritage properties, and this includes a very specific way of managing assets because of the conditions assessments, because of the way that you treat the asset, and because of the difference in maintenance that it involves. And finally, there is quite a bit of attention. It's not necessarily articulated well at the moment how each department should respond, but within the Treasury Board and within the Privy Council Office, there's a lot of attention being paid to the way that we can actually be helping and supporting the economy, and in our case specifically, the construction sector. And what that means is how can we help software vendors, private industry, and all of the groups involved in between, interest groups like Building Smart and CanBIM, how can we help in a way that we are meeting and fulfilling our mandate, but in such a way that we get quality for years to come, and we can rely on the private sector in a continuum. So some of those industry drivers, as I was mentioning, Building Smart and CanBIM, we've spoken quite a bit at events like this, spoken with some of the thought leaders, had one-to-one conversations on different committees. I myself am part of one of the committees, Owners Committee. And within Building Smart, again, the operations, the education, all of these things that are coming down from the international level, and that includes International Organization for Standardization. And the vehicle there is the Standards Council of Canada. And one of the questions that we get asked very often is, why is there not a standard set of requirements for owners? Why is there not some kind of generic standard that we can all be trying to strive for and meet? And the simple answer to that is there was not enough owner-level buy-in within government. And it's not that we weren't interested at all, but the expertise has to be there. There also has to be a home for it, which really isn't necessarily within an owner's mandate. It's more a Standards Council of Canada action. And of course, we've had a lot of interesting opportunities, and some of the ways that we hope to be able to support the economy is by setting challenges under the Built in Canada Innovation Program, where we can challenge industry to meet our requirements, and you have an opportunity to get funding and support in meeting that challenge. So for example, we can set something like, okay, we have cloud collaboration challenges, simply because BIM 360 is not necessarily hosted in Canada and definitely not on one of our servers. So if we have a highly secure building, like let's say Center Block, and we want to handle that within a BIM collaborative 3D cloud environment, how do we achieve that? That might be a challenge. And we've had some responses, and it's very interesting to see that we could actually locate an application server here in Canada within government control that would facilitate 3D cloud collaboration within BIM. So these are some of the things that we've started to look at. Natural Resources Canada, of course, is looking at building energy modeling. NSERC is working all the time on Center Block, West Block, through the research and academic institutions in the area. And of course, the Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada program is who hosts the Built in Canada program. The National Research Council is looking at all of our specs, our classification systems, our costing, and all of this has a part to play in the BIM gene pool, if you will. So I guess the real message I'd like to leave everyone with is for owners, especially at the scale of 33,000 building portfolio, digital transformation is going to change a heck of a lot more than just the asset life cycle. For us, it's a full enterprise transformation. And it's something that we are not going to achieve quickly, but we can definitely enable projects. And this is obviously where everyone has seen the quickest and the largest change is in the project enablement area. But all of the front end and all of the back end is where the largest change is going to be for us. So what would that really involve? Well, we're looking at this blend of BIM systems, so really master data coming from BIM, master data coming from GIS, and of course our master business data, which currently for us is in an SAP environment. Blending all of that so that it talks together but not necessarily replaces each other. We don't want redundancy, we want a single version of the truth. And really what we're moving towards is something called Digital Built Government of Canada. This is our initiative, and this is a role that we'd like to play in a larger one. We ideally, so if everyone is aware of Digital Built Britain, we would like to be able to play a federal role in creating something Canadian. So Digital Built Canada, how would we get there? And this is our federal perspective. We've done extensive research on the different approaches, okay? There's lots of people that argue for a mandate, and there's lots of people that argue against it. For, which would be top-down, you run the risk of disrupting small and medium enterprises. And I know lots of you have friends in small and medium consultancy firms. You know these people. They've been working well and hard for a very long time, and they're experts in their field. But this could possibly cause a disruption. It's forcing readiness where it may not exist. And we don't want to do that. Absolutely not. And in fact, we have lessons that it fosters silo behavior in other countries where they've tried to do this, that it requires much more responsibility and risk on us anyway as a federal community, because really what that would include is that we have to support private sector in the way that they deliver at that point. That involves a lot more education, a lot more engagement that we really don't have time for necessarily if we want to, as a country, aggressively pursue this. And so that means we can't do the top-down approach. And so far, Canada has been really following a bottom-up approach, which means, industry has been approaching us wanting to work in BIM. And we're like, sorry, we can't even receive 2D drawings properly at the moment, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. Slow down, son, And this is a problem, because bottom-up is not going to get us anywhere. And what it does is it enlists a little bit of approval behavior. We have the option of saying no in this model. And really, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when at this point. How can we justify, compared to the UK model, that given our overages in capital cost expenditures for projects, and they've marked an 11% improvement on their projection, not their expenditures, how can we justify not using BIM? And so we've settled on the middle out, and that's a horizontal engagement and collaboration platform. And what we're hoping to be able to do, we're going to start with just organizing ourselves, because that's a task unto itself. There are many government departments. We are all willing to play, but we're all coming from different perspectives and different information management situations, let's say, and different legacy systems. So we have to figure out, first of all, how are we going to be consistent? How are we going to align in a creative, collaborative way? And then the next step would be to reach out. And we hope to be able to collaborate with provinces and territories, collaborate with the federal community of municipalities, and in fact, collaborate with industry and academia. So our process at the moment, this is how our plans are unrolling, and of course, like any project, there are delays and surprises. One of the biggest one was the amount of momentum that it gained. We were hoping to be able to work behind the scenes a little bit for a year and not be flashing our cards yet, because we wanted to have everything set and have all the answers for when the questions came. This was not how it rolled out. The minute anyone heard about BIM being used in the federal government and there being some kind of initiative in the background that was going to align all of this, we had people flocking to the initiative, wanting to be part of our community, wanting to be part of the engagement, pushing. So just to give everyone some context, a year ago today, we weren't talking about this at all. In fact, 6 months ago, we hadn't even launched. We launched March 31st, and we're being pushed for an online presence as of end of July. So we're really hoping that this will pan out in a consistent way, but it seems that we're having to pull up our skirts and really make an effort to get this done in a grassroots way instead, which is okay. But really the aim of phase 2, we're in phase 1 at the moment. Phase 2 is really about creating this baseline. We want everyone to be on the same page, and we want to know what that page is. So we're trying to create some consistency, and from there we'd actually be able to engage education and capacity building. So we're looking at learning management systems. We're looking at how we raise interest and knowledge within the federal government. And then we're looking at putting all of that in the form of e-workbooks, tutorials, explanations, in-person activities, workshops, and then, creating that in a space that's accessible for all, working out in the open, and then being able to share that with the provinces and territories, the municipalities, academia, and really have an exchange there, a dialogue. And then eventually, when this is a consistent way that we've all agreed to, we'll be able to engage with private sector. So obviously, that's phase 4. So some of the lessons that we've already learned in our other digital transformation, so within HR, within finance, all of the people that got to go first and have smartphone apps, strategic direction and policy renewal is really important. And so far, this is the key element that's been missing. So we can try our best and struggle at the project level, at the asset level, to change the way we work and change the way that we're delivering. But if we can't change the way that the entire program is run, what's the point? We're just going to struggle. We're going to be justifying and pushing on every project. Instead, we would prefer to set a strategic direction, an objective, have it blessed. We're hoping to be able to speak with Cabinet about this, and from there, go into project enablement. We are still working in project enablement because we need our lessons. We need to be able to speak authoritatively and as an informed client. But in the meantime, we would really like to be able to set some policy renewal. And from there, the lessons that we learn within project enablement, be able to get a really tight feedback loop, be able to learn lessons from what's been done elsewhere, adapt and adopt as best as possible, whatever is missing, and move into enterprise transformation from there. So this was me on the highway from Edmonton to Calgary yesterday. I was, having a really hard time reading your signs. And I guess the real message here is that we would really like to align with everyone. This doesn't mean that anything is going to have to be recreated. In fact, what we're looking for is a way to piece all the efforts in a Canadian context towards a national direction together. And we've spoken with Open Geospatial Consortium, we've spoken with Building Smart, we've spoken with CanBIM about this, and in fact the next step is to then go to the international committee and look for the support to be able to do that. Because the lessons that we need to learn are from other countries that have done this successfully. I'm thinking the UK, but I'm also thinking Australia, I'm also thinking Singapore, I'm thinking Hong Kong and the US, and what can we learn here? So part of our roadmap, we've set desired outcomes in alignment with the Building Smart roadmap towards digital transformation. And what those look like, we've really touched on everything up until the blue. So because we're only towards the end of phase 0, we haven't been able to write an evaluation report. But this is something that we would like to be able to publish and make accessible to the community. And we would like to start setting up connections that will sustain the momentum of this initiative moving forward. We want this out of the hands of the federal community and in the hands of someone who is a nonpartisan third party as soon as possible, because in our opinion, if it stays in government too long, it's going to move too slowly, and this is not what, as a country, we need. So, I encourage everyone to ask questions. I will be here all day and this evening, and if you have any questions regarding how to deliver services with us, or whether or not what you can do to get involved with some of the innovation funding, absolutely look me up and ask me. And if I can't answer the question myself, I'll point you in the right direction.